Marcus Chin stared at his bank account balance on his phone screen, the numbers glowing mockingly in the dim light of the university coffee shop. $347. That was all that stood between him and sleeping in his beat-up Honda Civic for the rest of the semester. The engineering program at Neo-Tokyo International University was demanding enough without having to worry about basic survival. He refreshed the housing app for the 100th time that day, scrolling through listings that might as well have been written in gold ink for all the good they did him. Studio apartments started at 2,000 credits a month, and even shared rooms in the sketchy part of the city cost more than his entire monthly budget from his part-time job at the campus tech repair shop. Then he saw it. Room available immediately. Clean, quiet, fully furnished. 150 credits/month. Serious inquiries only. Contact Zara. Marcus nearly choked on his coffee. 150 credits? That was less than he spent on textbooks. He checked the address twice, then pulled up the location on his map. It was in Sector 7, the international district where students from across the galaxy studied. Not the worst area, definitely not the best, but survivable. His thumb hovered over the contact button. This had to be a scam. Nobody rented rooms that cheap, especially not furnished ones. But as another notification popped up showing his credit card bill was due in 3 days, desperation overrode caution. "Hi, I'm interested in the room listing. Still available?" he typed quickly. The response came back within minutes. "Yes. Can you meet tonight? Address attached. Bring first month's rent in cash." Marcus checked his watch. 7:30 p.m. The address was only 20 minutes away by metro. He gathered his backpack, double-checked that he had the cash he'd withdrawn from his emergency fund, and headed out into the neon-lit streets of the city. The building turned out to be a converted warehouse in a mixed-use district. Not fancy, but not falling apart either. The kind of place where artists, students, and other people trying to make it on thin budgets carved out small pieces of the expensive city for themselves. Marcus climbed 3 flights of stairs, following the apartment numbers until he found 7C. He knocked on the heavy metal door, expecting to wait. Instead, it opened almost immediately. The woman who answered was unlike anyone Marcus had ever seen. She stood nearly 6 feet tall, with pale skin that seemed to have an almost luminous quality under the hallway lights. Her hair was deep black, so dark it seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, and fell in perfectly straight lines to her shoulders. But it was her eyes that made Marcus pause. They were an unusual violet color, with pupils that seemed just slightly too large. "You must be Marcus," she said, and her voice had an odd quality to it, like she was speaking from much deeper in her throat than normal humans did. "I'm Zara. Please, come in." The apartment was surprisingly spacious for its location. The main room served as both living area and kitchen, with large windows that looked out over the city skyline. Everything was clean and minimally decorated, but comfortable. What struck Marcus most was how quiet it was. Despite being in the middle of a busy district, no outside noise seemed to penetrate the walls. "The room is back here," Zara said, leading him down a short hallway. She moved with an unusual grace, her footsteps making almost no sound on the hardwood floors. The bedroom was perfect. A decent-sized bed, a desk by the window, built-in closets, and its own small bathroom. Marcus had been prepared to sleep on a futon in someone's living room for this price. "This is amazing," he said, trying not to sound too eager. "But I have to ask, why is the rent so low? This place could easily go for 800 credits a month." Zara turned to face him, and, for just a moment, Marcus thought he saw her eyes reflect the light like an animal's. But when he blinked, they looked normal again. "I'm not interested in profit," she said. "I work unusual hours, and I'm rarely here during the day. I just need someone reliable to help with utilities and to make sure the place isn't empty all the time. The building management prefers occupied units." It sounded reasonable enough. Marcus had met plenty of international students who had family money and weren't worried about maximizing rental income. "What kind of work do you do?" he asked, trying to make conversation. "Research," Zara replied. "Biological sciences. Very specialized. Most of my work happens at night when the labs are quieter." Marcus nodded. He knew several grad students who preferred working late when they could have equipment and lab space to themselves. "I should mention," Zara continued, I have some specific requirements for roommates. I need someone who can respect boundaries and privacy. I don't host guests often, and I'd appreciate the same consideration. Also, I follow a very strict diet for health reasons, so I prefer to keep our food separate. That's totally fine, Marcus said quickly. I'm pretty focused on my studies anyway. Engineering program keeps me busy. Zara smiled, and Marcus noticed her teeth seemed unusually white and sharp. Probably just good genetics and dental care. Excellent. Do you have the first month's rent? Marcus handed over the cash, still hardly believing his luck. Zara counted it quickly and then extended her hand. Welcome home, Marcus. Her handshake was firm, but her skin felt unusually cool despite the warm evening. Marcus attributed it to the air conditioning and the building's thick walls. I'll get you a key made tomorrow, Zara said. For tonight, I'll be here to let you in. I usually leave around 11 p.m. and return before dawn, so you'll have the place to yourself most nights. As Marcus went back to his old dorm to pack his meager belongings, he felt a weight lift from his shoulders. Sure, Zara seemed a little odd, but everyone had their quirks. International students especially often had different cultural mannerisms that could seem strange at first. The important thing was that he now had a place to live that wouldn't bankrupt him. He spent the next few hours gathering his clothes, textbooks, and electronics into a few large duffel bags and boxes. His roommate at the dorm, Jeff, helped him load everything into his car. You sure about this? Jeff asked as they carried the last box down to the parking garage. I mean, nobody rents rooms that cheap unless there's something seriously wrong with the place or the person. It's fine, Marcus insisted. She seems nice enough. Just a little reserved. Reserved? Dude, you described her like she was some kind of vampire or something. Pale skin, weird eyes, only active at night. Marcus laughed. Come on, that's ridiculous. She's probably just from one of the outer colonies where people don't get much sun, and lots of researchers work night schedules. Jeff shrugged. All right, but if you disappear and turn up drained of blood, don't say I didn't warn you. I'll be sure to include that in my last will and testament, Marcus replied sarcastically. When he returned to the apartment, Zara helped him carry his things upstairs. Despite her slender build, she lifted the heavy boxes with surprising ease, taking two at a time while Marcus struggled with one. Thank you, he said as they finished bringing everything up. I really appreciate this. You have no idea how much of a lifesaver this is. I'm glad it works out for both of us, Zara replied. I'll let you get settled. Remember, I'll be leaving soon and won't be back until early morning. True to her word, Marcus heard the front door close quietly at exactly 11 p.m. He spent the next hour unpacking and setting up his room, finally collapsing onto the comfortable bed around midnight. For the first time in weeks, he felt like he could actually focus on his studies instead of constantly worrying about money and housing. As he drifted off to sleep, Marcus thought he heard sounds from somewhere else in the building. Footsteps in the hallway, maybe, or voices speaking in a language he didn't recognize. But the sounds were faint and didn't last long, so he dismissed them as typical apartment building noises. What he didn't notice was the way the shadows in his room seemed to move independently of any light source, or how the temperature dropped several degrees after Zara left. And he certainly didn't see the pale figure that stood silently outside his window on the fire escape for nearly an hour, watching him sleep with glowing violet eyes. Marcus Chun had indeed scored an incredible bargain on his new room. He would soon discover exactly what he had paid for. Marcus woke up feeling more rested than he had in months. Sunlight streamed through his window, and for a moment, he forgot where he was. Then, the events of the previous evening came rushing back, and he smiled. His housing crisis was over. He checked his phone. 8 a.m. Perfect timing to grab breakfast and make it to his advanced materials engineering class. As he got dressed, he realized how quiet the apartment was. No sound of movement from Zara's room, no shower running, no morning routine noises. She must be a really heavy sleeper after working all night. In the kitchen, Marcus found a note on the counter written in elegant handwriting. Coffee beans in the freezer. Help yourself. Please keep noise to minimum during day. Thank you. Z. He made coffee quietly, noting that the beans were an expensive imported brand from Europa Station. Definitely outside a typical graduate student budget. Either Zara came from money, or her research paid extremely well. As he waited for the coffee to brew, Marcus explored the common areas more thoroughly. The apartment was immaculately clean, almost sterile. The furniture was modern but sparse, and there were no personal photographs or decorations anywhere. The refrigerator contained only a few items, all of them in opaque containers that he couldn't see into. Respecting Zara's request about keeping food separate, he didn't investigate further. One thing that struck him as odd was the windows. They all had heavy blackout curtains, and several had additional sheets of what looked like metallic film attached to the glass. When he peered between the curtains, the city looked strangely dim despite the bright morning sun. The window treatments were blocking far more light than seemed normal. Marcus shrugged it off. Maybe Zara had a medical condition that made her sensitive to light. That would explain the nocturnal schedule and the pale complexion. His first week in the apartment passed smoothly. Zara was the perfect roommate in terms of not being intrusive. True to her word, she left every evening around 11 and returned before dawn. Marcus barely saw her except for brief encounters when their schedules overlapped. During those brief meetings, though, he noticed more unusual things about his roommate. She never seemed to eat anything, at least not when he was around. The mysterious containers in the refrigerator never seemed to empty or be replaced. She moved with complete silence, to the point where Marcus often didn't realize she was home until he happened to see her. And there were the physical details that became more apparent the more he observed her. Her skin wasn't just pale, it was almost translucent. He could sometimes see the faint outline of blood vessels beneath the surface. Her teeth, which he'd initially thought were just very white and, well cared for, seemed to come to sharper points than normal human teeth. And her eyes definitely reflected light in the dark, like a cat's. But the strangest thing was her effect on electronic devices. Marcus's phone battery drained faster when he was in the same room with her. His laptop sometimes glitched or ran slower. Even the apartment's lights seemed dimmer when she was around. Marcus tried to rationalize everything. Pale skin could be genetic or the result of a medical condition. Sharp teeth were probably just unusual genetics. Eyes that reflected light could be a rare trait or perhaps colored contact lenses with some kind of reflective coating. Electronic interference could be caused by any number of things in a building this old. But his engineering mind couldn't completely dismiss the accumulating anomalies. The situation came to a head during his second week in the apartment. Marcus had been up late working on a project in the common room when Zara returned from her nightly research. It was about 4 in the morning, and he was hunched over his laptop at the dining table, surrounded by printouts and coffee cups. "You're up late," Zara said as she entered. She wasn't carrying any bags or equipment that would suggest she'd been at a university lab. "Project due tomorrow," Marcus replied without looking up. "Well, today, technically. Sometimes the engineering program feels like it's designed to kill us. Humans do seem to push yourselves to remarkable extremes," Zara said. Something about the phrasing made Marcus look up. Humans? As opposed to what? Zara paused, and Marcus saw something flicker across her expression. As opposed to students from worlds with less demanding educational philosophies. Some cultures prioritize balance over achievement. It was a reasonable save, but Marcus caught the slight hesitation. He decided to test something. "Yeah, the Martian students always seem more relaxed about deadlines," he said, watching her reaction carefully. "Indeed," Zara agreed. "Mars has a very different approach to time management." Marcus frowned. Mars was a mining colony with barely 50,000 people, and it definitely didn't have any universities. Any real interplanetary student would know that immediately. Either Zara had never actually met students from other worlds, or she wasn't paying attention to what he was saying. "What kind of research are you doing again?" Marcus asked, keeping his tone casual. "Biological systems. Specifically, metabolic processes in extreme environments." "That sounds fascinating. Which lab do you work with?" Another pause. "It's a private research facility. Very specialized. Not affiliated with the university." Marcus nodded, but his suspicions were growing. In a city this size, there were only a handful of private biotech companies, and he'd never heard of any that did significant enough research to require full-time night shift work. "I should let you get back to your project," Zara said. "Good luck with your deadline." She moved toward her room with that unnaturally silent walk. But As she passed behind Marcus's chair, something extraordinary happened. The hair on the back of his neck stood up, and every electronic device in the room flickered or dimmed. His laptop screen went dark for a full second before the system recovered. Marcus stared at his computer screen as it slowly came back to life. There was no way that was a coincidence. Whatever Zara was, she was affecting the local electromagnetic field just by being near him. He waited until he heard her bedroom door close. Then, quietly packed up his materials. Back in his own room, Marcus sat on his bed and tried to think through what he knew logically. Zara displayed multiple physical characteristics that weren't quite human normal. She claimed to do research, but showed no evidence of actually working at any legitimate institution. She had an unusual effect on electronic devices. She was only active at night and went to great lengths to block sunlight from the apartment. She never seemed to eat normal food. Marcus felt ridiculous even thinking it, but the evidence was pointing toward a conclusion that should have been impossible. Everything about Zara suggested she wasn't entirely human. But what was the alternative? That he was living with some kind of alien? That was absurd. Except that the city was home to dozens of interplanetary species. The university itself hosted students from 12 different worlds. Just because most aliens looked more or less humanoid didn't mean they were identical to humans. And if someone wanted to blend in on Earth, appearing as human as possible would be the logical approach. Marcus pulled out his laptop and started researching. He looked up university enrollment records for anyone named Zara in the biological sciences. Nothing. He searched for private research facilities in the city that worked with metabolic processes. Found 3, none of which operated extensive night shifts. Then, he tried a different approach. He searched for information about known alien species that matched Zara's characteristics. Pale skin, unusual eyes, nocturnal habits, effects on electronics, apparent superhuman strength. What he found made his blood run cold. There were scattered reports from frontier worlds about a species that had been encountered only rarely. They were called the sanguinari by xenobiologists, though they seemed to use different names for themselves. They were humanoid, but distinctly not human. They were nocturnal, had enhanced physical capabilities, and, most significantly, they fed on the bioelectric energy of other living beings. The reports described them as parasitic, but not necessarily malevolent. They needed to feed on energy from other organisms to survive, but they could do so without causing permanent harm to their hosts. In fact, many of the documented encounters suggested that sanguinari formed symbiotic relationships with other species, providing protection or assistance in exchange for energy. But there was another detail that made Marcus's hands shake as he read. Sanguinari were known to be incredibly sensitive to electromagnetic fields. Their presence disrupted electronic devices, and they had to be careful around anything involving complex circuitry. Marcus closed his laptop and sat in the dark, trying to process what he'd learned. If Zara was actually a sanguinari, it explained everything about her behavior and appearance. But it also meant he was living with an energy-feeding alien who had been less than honest about her true nature. The question was, what did she want from him? And was he in danger? As if summoned by his thoughts, he heard a soft knock on his bedroom door. Marcus. Zara's voice was barely above a whisper. Are you awake? I wanted to discuss something with you. Marcus's heart rate spiked. He considered pretending to be asleep, but realized that if Zara really was what he suspected, she would probably know he was awake anyway. Yeah, I'm up, he called back. May I come in? Marcus looked around his room, suddenly aware of how vulnerable he was. But running wasn't an option, and if Zara meant him harm, a locked door probably wouldn't stop her anyway. Sure. The door opened slowly, and Zara stepped into the room. In the dim light from his desk lamp, her alien characteristics were more obvious than ever. Her skin seemed to glow faintly, her eyes were definitely reflecting light, and when she moved, it was with a grace that no human could match. I think we need to have an honest conversation, she said. Marcus's throat went dry. About what? Zara closed the door behind her and leaned against it. About what I am, and why I really offered you such an inexpensive room. Marcus gripped the edge of his desk chair, every muscle in his body tense. I'm listening. Zara remained by the door, her violet eyes studying his face carefully. You've been researching me, haven't you? I can sense the electromagnetic signatures from your devices. You've been looking up things that match my characteristics. There was no point in denying it. Yeah, I have. And I think I know what you are. Do you? Zara tilted her head slightly, and the movement was too fluid, too precise to be human. What conclusion have you reached? Sanguinari, Marcus said, surprised by how steady his voice sounded. Energy vampire from the outer colonies. Zara's expression shifted to something that might have been surprise, or perhaps approval. That's remarkably accurate. Most humans who figure out that I'm not like them assume I'm some kind of shapeshifter or android. Very few make the connection to actual xenobiology. So it's true. It's true. Zara moved away from the door, walking to the window. She kept her distance from Marcus, which he appreciated. My species does feed on bioelectric energy from other living beings. We've been doing so for millions of years. Marcus felt his scientific curiosity warring with basic survival instinct. How? And why did you choose to live here, with humans? The process is harmless if done correctly, Zara explained. We can draw small amounts of energy from proximity to other living beings without causing any permanent damage. Think of it like the way your body naturally sheds skin cells or hair. You're constantly producing bioelectric energy that dissipates and used anyway. And the why? Zara turned back toward him, and, for the first time since he'd met her, she looked genuinely vulnerable. Because my people are dying. Marcus blinked. What do you mean? The Sanguinari homeworld was destroyed 3 years ago, not by war or natural disaster, but by our own success. Zara's voice carried a weight of sadness that seemed to make the room itself feel heavier. We became too good at energy harvesting. We created technology that could extract bioelectric energy from entire ecosystems at once, instead of the slow, careful feeding we had done for millennia. What happened? We drained our own planet. Every living thing, from the smallest microorganism to the great forest mines that had existed for thousands of years. All of it, consumed to power our civilization. Zara looked down at her hands. By the time we realized what we had done, it was too late. The homeworld was a dead rock, and only a few thousand of us had made it off-planet. Marcus felt a chill that had nothing to do with the room temperature. So you're refugees, scattered across the galaxy, trying to find sustainable ways to survive without repeating our mistake. Most of my people have gone to uninhabited worlds, trying to develop new technologies that don't require feeding off other life. But I chose a different path, living among humans. Living among the most remarkable species I've ever encountered. Zara's eyes met his, and Marcus saw something in them he hadn't expected, genuine admiration. Do you know what makes humans special, Marcus? I'm guessing you're going to tell me. Your inefficiency, Zara said with a slight smile. Every other intelligent species I've studied uses their bioelectric energy with remarkable precision. They generate exactly what they need and waste virtually nothing. But humans? You're incredibly wasteful with your energy. Marcus frowned. That doesn't sound like a compliment. It's the highest compliment I can give. You generate far more bioelectric energy than you actually use. Your emotions, your creativity, your passion, your stubborn refusal to accept limitations. All of it produces massive amounts of excess energy that just radiates away unused. Understanding began to dawn on Marcus. So when you feed off humans, I'm not taking anything you need. I'm harvesting energy that would otherwise be lost anyway. And because humans produce so much excess energy, especially when they're engaged in challenging or meaningful work, one human can sustain a sanguinari indefinitely without ever noticing the loss. Marcus sat back in his chair, trying to process this information. So you've been feeding off me this entire time? Yes. But before you get angry, consider this. Have you felt weak or tired since moving in? Have your academic performance or physical health declined in any way? Marcus thought about it. Actually, he'd been feeling better than ever. More energetic, more focused, sleeping better. No, if anything, I've felt better. That's because the feeding process, when done properly, is symbiotic. I take excess energy that you don't need, but my presence also helps regulate your bioelectric field. It's like having a living battery manager that optimizes your energy distribution. Is that why my electronics work better when you're around? Marcus asked, then stopped. Wait, no? They work worse. They work worse because I'm absorbing electromagnetic energy from them too. But Your biological systems work better because I'm helping balance your energy patterns. Marcus stood up and started pacing, his mind racing. Okay, so you're an alien energy vampire who's been secretly feeding off me. But it's actually helping me somehow. I can accept that, I think. But why tell me now? Why not just keep it secret? Zara was quiet for a long moment. Because something has changed, and I need your help. What kind of help? 3 days ago, I detected other sanguinari in the city. At least 6 of them, possibly more. And they're not like me. Marcus stopped pacing. What do you mean? They're using the old methods. Aggressive feeding. They're draining energy from humans without regard for the long-term consequences to their hosts. Zara's expression hardened. They're going to kill people, Marcus. And when they do, it's going to expose all of us. Can't you just talk to them? Explain that there's a better way. I tried. They're not interested in sustainable feeding. They view humans as livestock, not as potential partners. They think I've gone soft by choosing to live among you instead of ruling over you. Marcus felt a chill. Ruling over you? Sanguinari have certain advantages over humans. We're stronger, faster, more durable. Our senses are more acute. We can influence electronic systems and, to some extent, the bioelectric fields of other organisms. Some of my people believe that gives us the right to treat other species as subordinate. But you don't. I've spent 2 years living among humans, Marcus. I've seen what you're capable of when you're not being exploited or controlled. Your species has potential that mine lost long ago. Zara moved closer, and Marcus could feel a strange tingling sensation, like static electricity in the air around her. Humans still dream. You still reach for things that seem impossible. You still create art and music and literature that serves no practical purpose except to express the complexity of your inner lives. My people used to be like that, before we became obsessed with efficiency and power. We lost our creativity when we started seeing everything in terms of energy consumption and optimization. But humans? You're beautifully, chaotically inefficient. You pursue knowledge for its own sake. You help strangers for no logical reason. You fall in love and write poetry and build monuments to abstract concepts. Marcus found himself oddly moved by this perspective on humanity. So you want to protect that. I want to protect you. Not just humans in general, but you specifically. Zara's voice softened. Over the past 2 weeks, I've learned more about human nature from living with you than I did from years of academic study. You work yourself to exhaustion on projects that fascinate you. You worry about classmates you barely know. You chose engineering because you want to build things that will help people, even though there are easier paths to wealth and status. You've been studying me? I've been learning from you. There's a difference. Zara looked directly into his eyes, and Marcus felt that strange electric sensation again. And what I've learned is that humans like you are worth preserving, worth fighting for. Marcus sat back down, feeling overwhelmed. What exactly are you asking me to do? Help me stop the other sanguinari before they destroy the delicate balance I've worked to create. I can't do it alone. They're stronger than I am, and they know I've been living among humans. They don't trust me, but I'm just a human. What can I do against alien energy vampires? Zara smiled, and for the first time, the expression looked genuinely warm instead of mysterious. You can do what humans do best. You can be unpredictable. You can think of solutions that no logical, efficient mind would ever consider. You can be beautifully, chaotically creative. Marcus looked at his roommate, who he now knew was an alien refugee who had been feeding off his energy for weeks, and who was now asking him to help fight other aliens to protect humanity. By any reasonable standard, he should be calling the authorities or running away as fast as possible. Instead, he found himself thinking about the engineering problems this situation presented. How do you fight beings who are stronger and faster than humans? How do you protect a population that doesn't even know they're being threatened? How do you turn humanity's supposed weaknesses into advantages? All right, Marcus heard himself saying. Tell me everything you know about these other sanguinari. Let's figure out how to stop them. Zara's relief was visible. Thank you, Marcus. You have no idea how important this is. Actually, I think I'm starting to, Marcus replied. But we're going to need a plan. And probably some equipment. And definitely more coffee. For the first time since he'd known her, Zara laughed out loud. It was a sound unlike anything Marcus had ever heard. like wind chimes made of crystals singing in perfect harmony. I think this partnership is going to work very well, she said. Marcus grinned back at her. Let's save the world, Rumi. The next morning found Marcus and Zara hunched over his laptop in the living room, surrounded by printouts, energy drink cans, and what looked like a conspiracy theorist's dream wall of connected information. Marcus had barely slept, his mind racing with possibilities and plans. Zara, of course, didn't seem to need sleep at all. Show me again, Marcus said, pointing at the map they'd created of the city. Where did you detect them? Zara traced several locations with her finger. Here, in the financial district. 2 of them, I think. They're feeding off the high-stress energy from the office workers. Here, near the university campus, probably targeting students during exam period when stress levels are highest. And here, in the entertainment district. The entertainment district makes sense, Marcus mused. Lots of emotional energy there. But they're not being subtle about it, are they? That's the problem. Aggressive feeding leaves traces. The humans they target become listless, depressed. Some have ended up in the hospital with unexplained fatigue. It's only a matter of time before someone notices the pattern. Marcus studied the data they'd compiled. Okay, so we know where they are and how they're hunting. What we need is a way to either drive them off, or... He paused. Can sanguinari actually be killed? We're very difficult to kill, but not impossible. However, violence should be our last resort. If humans discover that some aliens have been feeding off them, it could destroy interspecies relations across the galaxy. Right? So we need a solution that protects humans, but doesn't create an interstellar incident. Marcus leaned back in his chair, thinking. Tell me more about how your feeding works. You said you can sense bioelectric fields. Yes, all living things generate bioelectric energy, but the patterns are different for different species. Humans have very distinctive signatures, chaotic, but in beautiful, complex ways. I can sense human bioelectric fields from about a mile away. And the other sanguinari can too? Of course. Marcus grinned. That's their weakness. I don't understand. They're hunting by sensing human bioelectric signatures, right? So what happens if we flood the area with fake signatures? Or better yet, what if we mask the real human signatures entirely? Zara stared at him. That's actually not impossible. But it would require technology that doesn't exist. Yet, Marcus corrected. It doesn't exist yet. He stood up and started pacing, his engineering mind shifting into high gear. I need to understand exactly how bioelectric detection works. Is it like electromagnetic radiation? Can it be blocked or interfered with? Yes, but the equipment needed would be massive. You'd need industrial-grade electromagnetic field generators, and the power requirements alone. What if we didn't try to block the fields? What if we amplified them instead? Marcus was thinking out loud now, the pieces of a plan starting to come together. You said humans generate excess bioelectric energy. What if we found a way to capture and redistribute that energy to create decoy signals? Zara's eyes widened. You want to build bioelectric field generators that mimic human energy signatures. Exactly. We create dozens of fake human signals scattered around the city. The other sanguinari won't be able to tell which signatures are real and which are artificial. It'll be like trying to find 6 specific people in a crowd of thousands. That's actually brilliant. But, Marcus, the technology involved is incredibly complex. Even if we could design such a system, building it would take months, maybe years. Marcus sat back down and pulled his laptop closer. Maybe not. I've been working with electromagnetic field manipulation in my advanced materials class. Professor Chun has been developing new metamaterials that can bend and focus EM fields with incredible precision. And the university's engineering lab has some of the most advanced fabrication equipment in the sector. You want to steal university equipment? Borrow, Marcus corrected, for the greater good of humanity. Besides, I work in the tech repair shop. I have legitimate access to most of the labs during off hours. Zara was quiet for a moment, and Marcus could see her thinking through the implications. Even if we could build the devices, how would we deploy them across the city without being detected? We don't deploy them across the city. We bring the sanguinari to us. Marcus opened a new document on his laptop and started sketching out a rough plan. We set up our field generators in one concentrated area, Make it look like there's a massive gathering of humans with unusually high bioelectric output. They'll be drawn to investigate. And then? Then, we trap them. Marcus looked up at Zara. You said they're stronger and faster than humans, but they're still vulnerable to electromagnetic interference, right? What happens if they're exposed to intense, chaotic EM fields? It would be extremely disorienting, like being blind and deaf simultaneously while someone spins you around. Perfect. We create a trap that floods the area with chaotic electromagnetic fields, disable their senses, and then, I don't know, convince them to leave somehow. Zara smiled. You really do think like a human. What's that supposed to mean? Any other species would either try to fight them directly or flee to safety. Only humans would try to build an elaborate technological trap to solve the problem. Marcus shrugged. Engineering is what we do. We solve problems by building stuff. He turned back to his laptop. Now, let's figure out the technical specifications for a bioelectric field generator. The next 18 hours passed in a blur of calculations, research, and careful infiltration of university labs. Marcus discovered that his access card worked in more places than he'd expected, and Zara's ability to manipulate electronic systems meant they could bypass most of the security protocols they encountered. The fabrication process was complex, but not impossible. Using Professor Chin's metamaterial research, Marcus designed a series of small devices that could generate and manipulate electromagnetic fields in precise patterns. Each device was about the size of a smartphone and could create bioelectric signatures that closely mimicked human energy patterns. Zara proved to be surprisingly useful in the lab. Her understanding of bioelectric systems was far more advanced than anything Marcus had learned in school, and she could sense exactly how close their artificial signatures were to real human patterns. By the end of the night, they had created 12 functioning bioelectric field generators. Testing time, Marcus announced as he activated the first device. Immediately, the lab's fluorescent lights flickered, and every electronic device in the room displayed minor glitches. It's working, Zara confirmed. The bioelectric signature is very convincing. Not perfect, but close enough to fool someone who isn't looking too carefully. They spent another few hours fine-tuning the devices and testing different configurations. By dawn, they had a dozen generators that could create realistic human bioelectric signatures, plus a central control unit that could coordinate all of them and create chaotic interference patterns on command. Now for the hard part, Marcus said as they packed up their equipment. We need to set up somewhere that will attract the other sanguinari, but where we can control the environment. I have an idea, Zara said. There's an abandoned warehouse in Sector 5, about 2 miles from here. It's been empty for months, but it's large enough for our purposes and isolated enough that we won't accidentally involve innocent bystanders. Perfect. We set up the generators to make it look like there's a massive gathering of humans inside. Wait for the other sanguinari to investigate, then activate the interference pattern and hope they're willing to negotiate. Zara looked at him curiously. You keep saying negotiate. What exactly are you planning to offer them? Marcus had been thinking about that question all night. The same thing you found when you started living with humans. A better way to survive. You said yourself that symbiotic feeding is more sustainable than aggressive energy drain. Maybe we can convince them that cooperation is better than predation. And if they refuse? Then, we hope our electromagnetic trap is strong enough to hold them while we figure out Plan B. They spent the afternoon setting up their equipment in the abandoned warehouse. The building was perfect for their needs, large enough to accommodate the field generators with proper spacing, isolated enough to avoid civilian casualties, but still within the range where the other sanguinari would detect the bioelectric signatures. Marcus arranged the generators in a complex pattern based on his knowledge of electromagnetic field theory, creating overlapping zones of artificial bioelectric energy that would appear to any external sensor like a gathering of several hundred humans. The central control unit was hidden in a makeshift command post they built behind a stack of shipping containers. This is either going to work brilliantly or get us both killed, Marcus muttered as he ran final diagnostics on the system. I should mention, Zara said quietly, that if this goes wrong, the other sanguinari will probably try to drain you completely. Not just feed off your excess energy, but consume everything you have. It would be unpleasant. Marcus looked up from his laptop. Are you trying to give me a chance to back out? I'm trying to be honest about the risks. You don't have to do this, Marcus. I could try to handle it alone. And what are your chances of success without help? Zara was silent for a moment. Very low. Then, we stick to the plan. Marcus activated the bioelectric generators, and immediately the warehouse filled with a subtle electric hum. On his laptop screen, sensor readings showed exactly what they wanted to see. Electromagnetic signatures that would appear to any sanguinari as a large group of humans with unusually high energy output. How long do you think before they show up? Marcus asked. Not long. A gathering this size, with energy levels this high, would be irresistible to aggressive feeders. Zara moved to the window and peered out through the dirty glass. There. Do you see those shadows moving across the rooftop of the building across the street? Marcus looked where she was pointing. At first he saw nothing, then caught a glimpse of movement that was too fast and too fluid to be human. They're here. 4 of them. They're circling the building, trying to find the best way in. Zara's voice was tense. Marcus, once they enter the warehouse, things are going to happen very quickly. Are you ready? Marcus's hands hovered over the control unit's keyboard. One command would activate the electromagnetic interference pattern and flood the warehouse with chaotic EM fields. Another would shut down all the bioelectric generators, eliminating the bait signals. Ready as I'll ever be. The warehouse's main door exploded inward with a sound like thunder. 4 figures flowed through the shattered doorway like liquid shadow. In the dim light of the warehouse, Marcus could barely make out their forms, but what he could see made his heart race. They moved with the same unnatural grace as Zara, but there was something predatory about them that she lacked. Their eyes glowed with a harsh, hungry light, and when they spoke, their voices carried an undertone that made Marcus's teeth ache. Such a delicious gathering, the lead figure said, scanning the warehouse. So many humans, so much energy. We'll feast well tonight. I don't see any humans, another said, confusion creeping into their voice. I sense them, but because there aren't any, Zara said, stepping out from behind the shipping containers. Hello, Korvax. I should have known you'd be leading this group. The lead sanguinari turned toward her, and Marcus got his first clear look at one of the aggressive feeders. Korvax was tall and pale like Zara, but where she had adapted to appear more human, he made no such effort. His skin had a metallic sheen, his eyes were solid black, and when he smiled, his teeth were clearly fangs. Zara, the human lover. Korvax's voice dripped with disdain. We wondered what happened to you after you disappeared from the refugee fleet. Now we know. You've been playing house with the cattle. They're not cattle, Zara replied firmly. They're intelligent beings with their own value and dignity. They're food, said one of the others, a female sanguinari whose voice sounded like breaking glass. Energy sources to be harvested. Nothing more. If they're just food, Marcus called out, stepping into view beside Zara. Then, what does that make you? All 4 of the aggressive sanguinari turned toward him, and Marcus felt their attention like a physical weight. The air around him seemed to thicken, and he could feel them probing at his bioelectric field. Ah, a pet human, Korvax said with amusement. How charming. Zara has taught it to speak. She didn't teach me anything, Marcus replied, fighting to keep his voice steady. Except that your people don't have to be parasites. You can choose to be partners instead. Partners? The female sanguinari laughed, and the sound made Marcus's skin crawl. With creatures that live for mere decades? With beings so primitive they haven't even mastered interstellar travel on their own? Primitive. Marcus felt his anger overriding his fear. Lady, my primitive species sent probes to other star systems before we even knew aliens existed. We've built computers that can simulate entire universes. We write poetry that moves people to tears, and create music that can express emotions we don't even have names for. And we, he continued, his voice rising, figured out how to build a trap that fooled for supposedly superior alien energy vampires into walking right into it. Marcus hit the activation key on his control unit. Every bioelectric generator in the warehouse instantly shifted from generating false human signatures to producing chaotic, high-intensity electromagnetic interference. The air filled with a bone-deep humming sound, and every metal surface in the building began to vibrate. The effect on the Sanguinari was immediate and dramatic. All four of them staggered as if they'd been physically struck. Korvax clutched his head, his black eyes flickering wildly. The others crashed into shipping containers and support pillars, their supernatural grace completely disrupted. "What is this?" Korvax snarled, trying to advance toward Marcus, but weaving like a drunk. "What have you done?" "Electromagnetic interference," Marcus replied, staying safely behind the shipping containers that shielded him and Zara from the worst of the field effects. "You see, the thing about relying on bioelectric senses is that they're vulnerable to the same kind of disruption as any other electromagnetic system." "Turn it off," the female Sanguinari shrieked. "You don't understand what you're doing." "I understand perfectly," Marcus said. "I'm leveling the playing field. See, you might be stronger and faster than humans, but you're also completely dependent on senses that humans can disrupt with the right technology." Zara moved closer to the edge of their safe zone. "Korvax, listen to me. This doesn't have to end in violence. There's a better way for our people to survive." "Never." Korvax managed to focus his attention on her despite the electromagnetic chaos. "We are the apex predators of the galaxy. We don't negotiate with food." "Then, you're going to starve," Marcus called back. "Because this is just the beginning. Give me another week in the university labs, and I can build devices that will make every human settlement in the galaxy invisible to your senses. Keep hunting humans aggressively, and you'll find your food supply disappearing everywhere you go." One of the other Sanguinari, a male who had been silent until now, struggled to speak through the interference. He's not bluffing. The technology, it's crude but effective. He could refine it." "Exactly," Marcus said. "But I don't want to do that. I want to offer you an alternative." "What alternative?" Korvax demanded. Marcus looked at Zara, who nodded encouragingly. "Symbiosis instead of predation. Zara has been living with humans for 2 years, feeding sustainably without harming anyone. She's healthier and stronger than she was when she was with the refugee fleet, and the humans she interacts with actually benefit from the relationship." "Impossible." "I'm proof that it's not," Zara said. "Marcus, show them the data." Marcus pulled out a tablet showing the bioelectric readings he'd been taking of himself over the past weeks. "These are my energy levels since Zara started living with me. See the improvement? My stress levels are down, my immune system is stronger, my cognitive function has improved. She's not draining my energy, she's helping me optimize it." The silent male Sanguinari was studying the data intently. "These readings are remarkable. The human's bioelectric field is more stable and efficient than I've ever seen. That's what symbiotic feeding can do," Zara explained. "Instead of draining energy chaotically, we can help regulate and improve the bioelectric systems of other species. In exchange, they generate more excess energy that we can safely consume. It's a win-win relationship," Marcus added. "Humans get biological optimization, Sanguinari get sustainable food sources, and both species get to learn from each other." Korvax was still struggling against the electromagnetic interference, but Marcus could see him thinking. Even if this were true, how could we trust humans? They would fear us if they knew what we were. Some would, Marcus admitted, but others would be fascinated. Humans love learning about new forms of life. And once we understand how the symbiotic relationship works, we could establish formal agreements. Imagine it. Sanguinari medical advisors helping humans optimize their bioelectric health, while humans provide willing energy sources and technological innovation. "You're talking about integration," the female Sanguinari said. "Mixing our species with theirs." "I'm talking about cooperation," Marcus corrected. "Both species keeping their identities while working together for mutual benefit." The silent male Sanguinari spoke up again. "Korvax, our current path is unsustainable. We've destroyed 13 worlds by aggressive feeding in the past year alone. Eventually, the galactic community will unite against us. But this could offer a way forward." Korvax was quiet for a long moment, the electromagnetic interference making his form flicker and waver. Finally, he spoke. "Turn off your machine, human. Let's discuss this properly." Marcus hesitated. "Your word that you won't attack us?" "You have it." Marcus looked at Zara, who nodded. He deactivated the electromagnetic generators, and the warehouse fell silent except for the settling sounds of overheated metal. The four aggressive sanguinari straightened up, their supernatural grace returning as their senses cleared. But they made no move to attack. "You've given us much to consider," Korvax said. "This symbiotic feeding, show us how it works." What followed was the most surreal conversation of Marcus's life. For the next 3 hours, he and Zara explained the principles of sustainable energy feeding while the four former predators listened with growing interest. Marcus demonstrated the bioelectric optimization process, showing how Zara's presence improved his cognitive function and physical health. Zara shared the biological data she'd collected over 2 years of symbiotic feeding. Slowly, the aggressive sanguinari began to understand what Marcus and Zara were offering. Not just a new feeding method, but a complete reimagining of how their species could survive in the galaxy. There would need to be protocols, the female sanguinari said. Agreements between individuals, regulations to prevent exploitation. Absolutely, Marcus agreed. And it would have to be voluntary on both sides. No coercion, no deception. And humans would accept this? Korvax asked. Even knowing what we are? Some would, Marcus said. Others wouldn't. But that's true of any new relationship between species. The important thing is to start small, prove that it works, and let the success stories speak for themselves. The silent male sanguinari, who had introduced himself as Varix, was studying Marcus's tablet again. The technological implications alone are staggering. If humans could learn to manipulate bioelectric fields the way we do, and if sanguinari could learn human engineering principles, Marcus added, imagine what we could build together. As dawn approached, an agreement began to take shape. The four aggressive feeders would stop hunting humans immediately. Zara would help them find willing human partners who could provide sustainable energy through symbiotic relationships. Marcus would work on developing the technology needed to facilitate and monitor these partnerships. This won't be easy, Korvax warned. Many of my people will see this as betrayal. They believe strength comes from domination, not cooperation. Then, they'll learn the same lesson my people had to learn, Marcus said. Evolution isn't about being the strongest or most dominant. It's about being the most adaptable. And cooperation is the ultimate adaptation. As the sun rose over the city, 5 beings from 2 different species stood in an abandoned warehouse, having forged the foundation of an entirely new kind of relationship. It would take time to build trust, to develop the technologies and protocols needed to make symbiotic partnerships work on a large scale. But they had taken the first step towards something that had never existed before in galactic history, a true partnership between species, based on mutual benefit rather than exploitation. Marcus looked at Zara and smiled. So, Rumi, ready for the next chapter? Zara's violet eyes sparkled with something that might have been hope. With humans, I'm learning to expect the impossible. Good, Marcus replied. Because we're just getting started. In the months that followed, Marcus's apartment became the unofficial headquarters for the first human sanguinari integration project. Word spread quietly through both communities, and soon they were facilitating dozens of symbiotic partnerships. The university, initially skeptical, became fascinated by the bioelectric optimization research and offered Marcus a full scholarship to continue his work. Other sanguinari refugees began arriving in the city, drawn by reports of a sustainable way to survive without harming other species. Not all of them were convinced by the symbiotic approach, but enough were that a small but growing community began to form. Marcus never did find out what his original housing budget should have been. By the time he thought to ask, it no longer mattered. He had found something far more valuable than an affordable room. He had found a purpose that would define the rest of his life. The universe was full of species that had never learned to truly cooperate across evolutionary lines. But humanity and the sanguinari were writing a different story, one partnership at a time. And it all started with a college student who was thrilled to score a bargain room, until his roommate turned out to be an alien vampire woman, who became his partner in reshaping the galaxy.